Welcome back to Utility Sports. We actually have some breaking news from Shams. He was saying that Russell Westbrook wants out of Houston per the Athletic, the NBA, and also Stadium. This is kind of big news. Obviously, Russell Westbrook's a guy that we thought would probably stick around this season yet and run it back with James Harden. If they were both to stick around there, I think they definitely had a chance at going a little further in the playoffs. But the thing that's kind of interesting about this story is after that had broke, I thought for sure James Harden would maybe also say the same thing. Maybe they're on the same page. However, you see with this tweet to the right that James Harden remains committed to the Rockets and is locked in for next season. So that kind of makes me wonder, what does he know from the Rockets front office perspective? You know, does he know their plan going into free agency, the draft, and the entire offseason? Who does he want to pair up with? Because I don't think he's going to try doing this by himself. Guys like House and Tucker and McLemore are not going to be guys that you can win with on your own next season. So there's got to be something in place, in my opinion, in order for him to want to fully commit to the Houston Rockets. Sheldon, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, there's basically two ways the Houston Rockets could go here. One of them being, trying to move Russell Westbrook here at this point for another player, similar to what they did with Chris Paul when they moved him for Russell Westbrook. Is, you're trying to get money back on your investment. The initial investment now being Russell Westbrook, who obviously they gave up multiple assets for, pick swaps, rights to draft picks to the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I think that's the route they're going to look to first go here, is maybe get back some players that are going to complement James Harden, complement their current roster, possibly a big man or two, to kind of stray away from small ball. Obviously, with Steven Silas as their new head coach, and the new front office management there with Daryl Morey on his way out, I think that's definitely a route they could go. But the other route is, kind of rebuilding and retooling. And I think that's kind of where they have to be a little careful, because at this point, James Harden is locked in and wants to stay. But I think if they do make a mistake here in this move and decide that they want to go a separate way, possibly Harden does ask out later in the season. I think that is a possibility. I don't think Houston should operate like they're for sure going to have James Harden for the remainder of his career. Moving into what our first trade is then for him, Austin, walk us through this trade, what's kind of going on, who's going where, and all that.
Yeah, so for this trade, we obviously have Detroit landing Russell Westbrook, which for Detroit, it makes sense. You need a guy that's going to kind of revitalize your franchise, bring a little bit of excitement to Detroit. Blake Griffin's not that kind of player anymore. So you're honestly just hoping to flip some of your role players and capitalize on a star still being on the market for a relatively cheap price. So what does this mean for Detroit and the guys on the way out? Tony Snell, John Henson, Derrick Rose all go to Philadelphia. You feel okay about the return for the 76ers, who only have to give up Mike Scott and Al Horford in this deal. Obviously, Al Horford has not worked out in Philly, right? So that's what's going to happen for Houston, is they're going to be receiving Horford, Scott, and Thon Maker. Obviously, a lot of people were high on Thon Maker going into the draft, and he's just not panned out. Had a lot of the physical tools you like, but it has not translated well at the NBA level. So I think this is a win-win-win trade for everyone in this scenario. Detroit gets their star. Philadelphia gets some role players and, a guy that can create. That's the really, really big thing for Philadelphia, is you need a guy that can come off the bench and really create and ignite that second unit. And then for Houston, you get two big men, well, technically three big men here, with Horford and Maker. You're kind of banking on a little bit of a jump from Maker, hopefully, but he's really nothing in the trade. But the big piece is Al Horford, who's going to fit really well with James Harden, in my opinion.
Yeah, looking at this, obviously, Horford, based on his play last year, this would be a little bit laughable, but I think the Rockets would be counting on Horford kind of going back to more of his Celtics form, which I think is very reasonable. The situation in Philadelphia is just not right for Horford. And I think that next to Harden, I think Horford could go back to really being a productive big again in the NBA, a guy who could play the 4 or 5. Look at the Sixers. Daryl Morey makes his first move here for them at this point. And acquiring Derrick Rose is not only a great fit, but this also gives them a lot of cap flexibility. Obviously, they're right up against the hard cap. They're going to be paying the tax for a long time. And I think this gives them a little bit of short-term contracts that are movable. They have assets to still move some of these other players with if they wanted to get off Tobias Harris later. or other moves that they want to make. And at this point, you're, kind of getting Derrick Rose to be that six-man creator version, or even maybe start him with Simmons at the 4. And Detroit, you're pairing Russell Westbrook with Blake Griffin trying to sell tickets. Obviously, this will be a down year, but Westbrook and Griffin are both under contract. So this is something that they can maybe, try and slip in as a 7 or 8 seed yet, because Westbrook is still a top 5 point guard in the league, in our opinion. And I think that he could give them meaningful minutes for, like you said, a relatively cheap price, with Derrick Rose really being the only valuable asset going out the door. Walking into our next trade here, Austin, we have the Detroit Pistons again, if you want to walk us through this one.
Yeah, for this one, we also have Detroit receiving Russell Westbrook. That's kind of the theme here. Detroit really could use a guy like Russell Westbrook, but in this trade, we are actually seeing Blake Griffin on his way out. So you're not going to have that pairing for a couple, for sure 3 years with the Blake Griffin, Russell Westbrook, but otherwise we're going to be seeing Charlotte make a move where they're going to end up with Blake Griffin and Justin Patton from Detroit, which is really a nothing trade in our opinion. That doesn't really have an effect. Houston is ending up getting 2 bigs, right? And Biyombo and Zeller. You're getting a little bit of cap flexibility because Biyombo will not be under contract after this year, and then Zeller, it'll just be 1 more year. But the important thing is, again, you're adding 2 bigs. You're also getting 2 guys that have really not performed very well for Charlotte. So honestly, if one of them pans out, this is a phenomenal deal for you, because obviously you're just giving up Russell Westbrook, which they seem pretty motivated to do. They don't hold a ton of leverage in terms of like he could sit out, but if you are Houston, you do want to get as many young players back as you can and try to build around that. But Malik Monk, Miles Bridges, 2 guys that were lottery picks, and obviously Monk has really disappointed, and Bridges has not looked great either. So just being able to get 2 young guys and 2 guys or 4 guys really that will be able to help you right away. They're going to be contributors, every single one of them, for sure in the regular season. Obviously, when the playoffs come around, you're going to cut some of Zeller's minutes and possibly Bridges' minutes. It kind of depends on how it goes. So that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, this is another one of those trades that this is kind of right around that borderline where they have to be careful with James Harden. They're getting pick 32 in those 4 players, but none of those players are, real game changers for them. And I think this puts a lot of pressure back on James Harden as the ball handler and scorer for that team. But this is a move that long-term, if Harden does request out, Monk and Bridges are 2 guys that haven't lived up to their potential and perhaps could be unlocked a little bit in Houston. For the Hornets, I absolutely love this. You're giving up a lot of guys you're not really sold on at this point, and pick 32 to acquire Blake Griffin, a player that's, when he's healthy, is an all-star level player in the East. And I think he fits really well as a pick-and-roll option with Devontae Graham. And I think that he'd be a real improvement for them, especially if they use pick 3 to go get a center to kind of make up for some of his defensive limitations around the rim. And for Detroit, again, you're flipping Griffin into Westbrook. Westbrook's a better player than Blake Griffin, more healthy player. And all around probably, a safer option moving forward. And he's going to be a guy who also puts fans in the stands at a consistent basis for them. And I think that makes a lot of sense still for Detroit. Jumping into our next one here, this one is a pretty straightforward trade. We got the Rockets with the Knicks. The Knicks use the contracts of Bobby Portis, Taj Gibson, Dennis Smith Jr., and Kevin Knox to match the money to go get Russell Westbrook from Houston. They also give up pick 27 in this deal. Pretty straightforward deal. Austin, what do you think about this trade?
Yeah, to be quite honest, this is not a trade that you're really writing home about if you're the Houston Rockets. Obviously, you're acquiring 2 big guys in this deal, neither which fit into your long-term plans or even the short-term. They're just not very good players. Dennis Smith Jr. is a guy that has had a really up and down career. Had a pretty good rookie year with Dallas, and then obviously with New York, he has really struggled. So you're banking on potential there, and the same thing with Knox, really trying to bank off its potential there. And you're also getting picked 27, which, really that's very hit or miss at that area. It's obviously nice to get a draft pick in that deal, but it really hinders on the development of the bottom 2 guys. And if you can land somebody nice or quality role player with pick 27.
Yeah, definitely. And looking at this, just for the viewers here, it's hard to really gauge what Russell Westbrook's value is. We believe he's still a top 5 point guard, but with what his contract is, he's due over $100 million over the next 4 years. And that's a big commitment for a team to make for a player that's game's really based off athleticism. He's kind of had a lot of playoff shortcomings. Got out of the first round of the playoffs for the first time since Kevin Durant left, and that's probably strictly because of James Harden, if we're being honest. And I think Westbrook's limitations do kind of hinder where his options go. I don't think a lot of contenders will be really vying for him. So he's kind of an interesting byproduct for a team that's, trying to really get more fans and buzz around their team more than anything. Moving into now some James Harden trades in case he does ask out at some point. Before we jump into this one, I just want to remind the viewers, please like and subscribe, especially if you are new. We really love making NBA content. We also post some NFL mock draft coverage and NBA mock draft coverage. And we'll also be doing a reaction video to the NBA draft depending on kind of how it goes and talking about the team. So if you do like the content we're pouring out, please subscribe. Leave comments down below who your favorite teams are, what you like about what we do, what you think we could do better. We really enjoy the feedback you guys give us. All right, Austin, looking at this trade here, we have James Harden and Ben McLemore going to the Milwaukee Bucks, and Chris Middleton, DJ Wilson, Dante DiVincenzo going to the Rockets, along with pick 24 this year, a 2024 unprotected first, and a 2026 unprotected first. Obviously, for the viewers, some are going to be questioning the fit because James Harden and Giannis Antetokounmpo have had a little bit of beef in the past. And I think this would be really contingent on Bucks management going to Giannis and saying, okay, we want to win. We're trying to win. Would you be okay with Harden coming in? Because at this point, I think this is a win trade on value for them. What do you kind of think on this? And do you like the fit of Harden and Giannis if Giannis were to be willing to accept to have Harden come in?
Yeah. So for this trade, just looking at it holistically from the player standpoint, Middleton's obviously a good player, but if we're being honest with ourselves, Milwaukee is not going to get any further with Middleton being that second guy. Obviously, have quite a bit of limitations in the playoffs with just having him as your second guy. Probably a top 30 player in the world right now, top 35. It's hard to know, but he's probably falls around that range. You're also getting assets if you're Houston, so you're getting a proven player. DiVincenzo, we would like to see a little bit more out of him, and obviously in Houston he could have a bigger role depending on if Harden and Westbrook are gone, he's definitely going to have a bigger role. And we're going to get to see Middleton then be the lead guy on a team. And I don't think Middleton as the lead guy translates very well. And then you're also getting quite a bit of draft pick capital back. And honestly, this could be really good for Houston if it depends on how the whole Harden and Giannis experiment go, because Giannis might be on his way out, and then maybe Harden demands trade again and doesn't want to play in Milwaukee anymore. So that could be really, really good for Houston in terms of down the road. And with a 2024 pick, 2026 pick, those could be high picks, right? Because then Milwaukee's left with pretty much nobody, nothing to show for it. You'd get a few assets back for Harden, obviously. But that could be a really great trade for Houston.
Yeah, I think Houston would kind of find themselves in a pretty strong position here. Middleton kind of reminds me a little bit of what Kevin Martin was for the years post Tracy McGrady there, and I think that this would be a little bit of a safe option for the Rockets. I think this would be a good way to prevent really kind of bottoming out and losing a lot of fans while also acquiring quite a bit of assets. DiVincenzo's a young defensive player. He's shows some signs offensively, but like you said, a little bit more consistency from him. And from the Bucks, I mean, at this point, you have two top 5 players in the world, in my opinion, in Giannis and James Harden. And I think that's your best chance of getting to the finals and ultimately convincing Giannis to sign that 5-year supermax in the following summer. Moving on to now our next trade here. We have a 76ers Houston Rockets trade, obviously one that's been very talked about. Austin, walk us through this trade.
So for Houston in this deal, obviously they're going to be acquiring picks 21, 34, and 36, along with a 2022 first-round pick. And then let's take a look at the players that you're getting here. So, very, very good draft pick capital in terms of in the short term. You have Al Horford coming in, and let's see. Then we have Josh Richardson, Ben Simmons, and Mike Scott. And so for this, obviously you're getting a great young asset in Ben Simmons coming back. You have a tradable asset in Josh Richardson if you feel he's not a fit long-term for you. You have Al Horford coming in, which he'll help you stay competitive in the short term. So honestly, if you wanted to, keep running it back, with your new team, then I'd feel pretty comfortable with this team running out there, having Ben Simmons and Horford still. But I think in this situation, they would maybe look to eventually flip Horford and Richardson and try to build around Ben Simmons. This is once again under the assumption that Houston does not have Russell Westbrook, because obviously he'll probably be on his way out if Harden's on his way out anyway. Mike Scott is really nothing on this trade. You could probably get second round pick for him. So you could get a lot of draft pick capital. And the hard part about this for Houston is you're losing Gordon and Covington and Harden. So, what's left on your roster, right? You got House and a couple of other players, but long-term, it's not sustainable to keep them around, and you're not going to be super competitive. But for Philly, it makes a lot of sense. You're getting a creator to put with Joel Embiid and James Harden. Obviously, Eric Gordon could be a sixth man, or he could even start. He would probably have to start in this situation. And Robert Covington's another nice player. So I think for Philadelphia, it makes a lot of sense because we've seen Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid just not work, right? So I've been a supporter a long time, keep them together. But we've gotten to the point where we've seen it doesn't work. A lot of adjustments have been made. Players and shooters have been put around them. It just hasn't worked so far. They couldn't even make it work with Jimmy Butler on their roster. So to be quite honest, I think it's time to maybe shake it up a little bit. And this is the perfect trade because Houston's getting a great asset in exchange for James Harden. I think they'd be extremely motivated to do this. And then James Harden gets a change of scenery and a chance to ultimately come out of the East.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at Simmons, obviously, Rockets management would have to be sold on him being a franchise player. I think a lot of executives around the league would probably see him that way, especially with some of his, his size and talent as a passer and a transition scorer. At this point, I think an open lane would be the route he would go with in Houston. And they're also getting a lot of draft pick capital here, some this year to really kind of start building up some shooting pieces around Simmons. And here for the 76ers, you're looking at not only acquiring Harden and his fit with Embiid. I think that would be a dominant duo, honestly, and I think they'd become instantly the favorite to come out of the East with that pairing. But also you're adding Eric Gordon as a shooting threat and a creator off the bench possibly. And also Robert Covington gives them really good front court depth in his return to Philadelphia, and a player that Joel Embiid talked about in the past really enjoying playing with. So I think this would be a home run trade for the Sixers, and I think the Rockets would feel pretty good about getting a player like Ben Simmons, who's coming off that poison pill provision in his contract at this point too after his extension. Now moving in to another trade we have. The Phoenix Suns here acquire James Harden straight up for Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre Jr., Ty Jerome campaign, pick 10 this year, a 2022 unprotected first, and a 2024 unprotected first. Obviously a very steep price to be paying, but the Suns seem to be all in on trying to compete. They've been linked to Chris Paul, and I think James Harden is the super Sion version of that in a way. Putting him next to Devin Booker, you're looking at probably the most deadly backcourt in the league, maybe besides Curry and Clay, based on what we've seen already in the past from those two. But from an offensive standpoint, Harden and Booker would be a nightmare for most teams. Who do you think says no in this trade, Austin? And do you like this trade for both sides?
Yeah, so I do like it for both sides, considering Phoenix is kind of in win now mode. We saw in the bubble they had performed very well. Obviously, they have Ayton yet. After this deal is completed, you have Devin Booker. I think this is a great deal for Phoenix on their end. You got to give up some pick capital, but I think it's definitely worth it if you want to try to improve the prestige of your franchise, the franchise image. I think this is the perfect way to do it and have James Harden come in. And for the Rockets, obviously you get some really good draft pick capital right off the bat. You get Kelly Oubre Jr., who you can keep as a long-term piece, or you can move for more draft pick capital. Ricky Rubio is definitely a guy that you probably would look for them to move under the assumption this is the kind of package you're getting back. You're not going to be competitive right away. So then they kind of go into Thunder mode where we start moving some of these guys. Ty Jerome's really a nothing in this trade, and so is Cameron Payne. You can maybe get a second for Ty Jerome if you find a team that likes him. But honestly, I think it's a great trade for both sides.
Yeah, all right, and moving into our final trade here, we have the Indiana Pacers actually buying in on James Harden. Obviously, this is contingent on his contract being 4 years at this point yet. Obviously, Indiana would be way more hesitant to pull a trigger on a guy expiring. But here, the Rockets would be acquiring Victor Oladipo, Jeremy Lamb, TJ McConnell, pick 54, and a 2021 unprotected first, 2023 unprotected first, and a 2025 pick swap option. Obviously, a lot to give up for Indiana, but potentially this is a move that could make them a contender out east with the strong front court play they have between Sabonis and Turner. Obviously, Warren kind of emerged this year, and Brogdon is a really good fit off the ball, as we've seen when he played with Giannis, and also on the ball as a pick and roll playmaker that could complement Harden especially when Harden's off the floor. What do you think about this trade? Do you like Oladipo going to the Rockets? Obviously, again, contingent on Russell Westbrook going out the door at that point. But I think this is a pretty solid return for the Rockets. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's a realistic return. Obviously, you might want to you would probably prefer some of the other trades, just judging off of Victor Oladipo's injury history. We don't know what he is anymore. That's kind of the issue in all of this. You are getting draft pick capital back. McConnell, who's just going to be a backup guard. Jeremy Lamb's going to probably be a bench player, could be a starter, but on this Houston team, he might be a starter. Actually, no, he would not be. But anyway, going back to this deal for the Pacers, it's a home run trade. Please pull the trigger if you are Indiana. You have him locked in for 4 years. Please do it. Get some return for Oladipo, essentially. Don't just lose him, because obviously he's kind of motivated to get out of Indiana. And then you got James Harden locked in. And like you had mentioned, great fit for the team. You get some really, really good front court play. Honestly, if you're Indiana and this trade comes up, and I would feel great about it if I were them.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to remember is that James Harden's a league-altering player. The Rockets have the longest playoff streak in the entire NBA now that the San Antonio Spurs missed this season. And quite frankly, it's because of James Harden. They've had so many rotating pieces through there: Trevor Ariza, Dwight Howard, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, and a whole bunch of other players. And quite frankly, the only consistent piece has been James Harden. Even obviously, he's been there longer than D'Antoni was. And they've been successful with Harden. And I think in the East, he'd actually make a lot of these teams really, really competitive and even possible title contenders in an easier road to the finals. Obviously, he hasn't made the finals with the Rockets, but he's gotten them to the Western Conference Finals a couple of times and ran into the Golden State Warriors, one of the best teams we've ever seen, and still competed with them at a high level. And I think when you're getting arguably the best scorer in all of basketball, it's going to make your team way, way better. And I think that that's why we see so much draft pick capital going out in a lot of these trades. And it'll be an interesting thing to monitor for sure. I'm a big Harden fan myself, and I hope that he gets moved. I think he deserves a chance at maybe going to a more complete team to really compete for a championship, and I hope he gets one at some point. Let us know down in the comments below where you think James Harden will get traded, if he does get traded, and let us know where you'd want to see him go. We really appreciate your guys' support again, so thanks for tuning into the video, and we'll see you in the next one.